Hello and welcome to Public Speaking Tips and Tales with Speaking Coach Kelly. This podcast is dedicated to helping you become a more confident and effective speaker. I'm your host, Kelly Kaye Walker, and each week we'll dive headfirst into the deep end of public speaking. I'll share real stories from the stage, interview other speakers, and evaluate speeches to show you what works on stage and what doesn't. So let's get started. I want to go deeper into stories today, but not about how to tell a better story. Today we're going to talk about what to do with your story. A speaker that gets up and tells great stories is awesome and everyone loves it and feels connected to them. But a speaker that shows how their stories can change a perspective, shift a mindset, or accomplish a goal is a speaker that is going to change thousands of lives. This weekend was the final round of the first annual Speaker Games. Our judges were Chris Barney, past president of the National Speakers Association, Tony Acosta, the Timpview TedX organizer, and Ann Washburn, body language expert and TEDx speaker. These are three very high-level experts in the speaking world, and their feedback was phenomenal. One thing they kept asking each contestant after their speech was, "What's in it for me?" Your speech was great, but what's in it for the audience? This question has been rolling around in the back of my head ever since because I think that that's what makes a difference between a great speaker and a life-changing speaker. They use their stories to reach into our brains and flip a switch, causing us to never see the world in quite the same way again. So, as is my habit, I have been researching that concept ever since, and I am excited to talk about what I've learned in this episode. It's all about connecting the dots for your audience. What do I mean by connecting the dots? Well, let's look at some examples of that when you connect the dots for your audience. So first, when you tell a story, that is a dot, which means you likely need to follow it up with a connector line to the next dot. You could do that by saying something like, "I told you that story because ... That sentence connects them from the story dot to the lesson dot. Now, as speakers, we have practiced our speeches so many times, and the connections feel super obvious to us. But remember, your audience is usually hearing this for the very first time, probably in a big room full of distractions, and maybe after 5 other speakers, or worse, just after lunch. Which means there is no guarantee they're going to be able to make those connections themselves. In fact, it's almost guaranteed that they won't if you don't point them out. What you need to do is to draw a line between the dot of your story and the dot of what that means for them, the dot of the lesson that will change their lives. I want to actually do this. I'm going to workshop this. So let's use my famous hiding in the bathroom story as my working example. I've told this story dozens of times, but in case you haven't heard it yet, let's head to that bathroom. In 2017, I went through a complete life transformation. I was in the worst part of a 12-year depression, and after getting fired over it, my schedule was suddenly free to discover the world of personal development seminars. After attending about 3 of these, I decided I wanted to become a motivational speaker and help others experience a complete life transformation too. So I was actively seeking out every opportunity I could find to learn about becoming a better speaker. In October of that year, I found myself attending a speaking competition to not only hear the speakers, but more importantly to me, hear the feedback from the judges. I wanted to know what worked and what didn't so I could follow my new dream of speaking. Well, the event was amazing, and I learned a ton listening to the feedback the judges gave each of the 4 contestants. I was feeling very happy with my choice to attend that day, and just before we all stood up to leave, the MC grabbed the mic and announced that they had 1 spot left for next month's contest. He held up the clipboard, inviting anyone to come up and claim that spot. It was at that moment that I learned that sometimes your body can take over when you want something badly enough, because suddenly I was up and making a beeline for that clipboard to sign up for the contest without any conscious decision to do so. I was weaving my way through the clumps of excited people who were milling around each other, chatting and saying their goodbyes, when I apparently blacked out. Because the next thing I knew, I was standing at the exit with no memory of how I'd gotten there. Luckily, there's a restroom right next to the exit, so I pivot and I burst through the door to the ladies' room. There's a long row of wooden doored stalls to my right and a long row of sinks to my left. I randomly fling one stall door open and flop myself down on a toilet to begin one of the most epic inner arguments of my entire life, going back and forth between future motivational speaker Kelly and currently scared out of her mind Kelly. I'm not ready, my scared self says. I'll look like an idiot. But you have to start somewhere, so why not here? They all seem nice. But I can't write and memorize a great speech in only a month. It's not enough time. Well, how do you know that? You've never tried. I bet you can do it faster than you think. On and on the argument goes, neither side willing to give in to the other. During this 10-minute struggle with myself in the ladies' room, as everyone prepares to head out to their cars with one last stop in the bathroom, I am serenaded by a chorus of flushing toilets, the deafening racket of the old-fashioned pump-handle paper towel dispensers, and the occasional psh psh of the industrial orange air freshener going off somewhere over my head. Eventually it goes silent as the parade of potty-goers dwindles down to zero, and in the silence, my future motivational speaker self finally wins that argument. So I stand up and I stride out of that bathroom like a woman on a mission. But just between you and me, I was also secretly hoping that I'd been in there for so long that everyone had packed up and left. But there he was, the man with the clipboard, standing near the exit with his back to me. I brace myself. I walk up and I say, "Hey." He turns around and says, "Oh, hey, I thought I saw you leave. Did you forget something?" "Yeah, I forgot I wanted to be a motivational speaker." "Is that spot still open?" I'm still so scared of public speaking at this point that when he says, "Yes, do you want it?" I burst into HTT, hysterical tears of terror. After a quick flash of alarm on his face, the man with the clipboard tries to comfort me and says I don't have to. I insist that I do, and so he gingerly holds out the pen towards me and says, "Well, we'd love to hear from you." I take the pen and somehow sign my name through the Niagara Falls of tears rushing out of my eyeballs, and in that moment, I am fairly sure that that poor man thinks he will never lay eyes on me again. But the contest arrives, and I show up ready to win, or at least hoping not to get booed off the stage. When he calls my name, I fight down the terror, stand up, and start walking across the room like a condemned man to the gallows. But about halfway to the stage, I realize he's still talking. And so I force myself to focus on what he is saying through my terror, just in case he's giving me new instructions or something else important I need to hear. But instead, what I hear is this. "You guys, Kelly left and came back last month to tell me she had to have the spot. She was so scared that she was crying hysterically, and I honestly thought she would not show up today. She has got to be terrified out of her skull. So give her a warm welcome." Oh, now, utterly humiliated, I walk out onto the very high stage. Did I mention I'm scared of heights? And I go right up to the front edge. and I hang the tips of my shoes over the edge of the stage into thin air. The spotlight is hot and also blinding, and I avoid raising my eyes too high for fear of getting my retinas burned off. The judges are lined up at a table right in front of the stage, staring at me expectantly. I'm holding the microphone in one hand and playing with the bottom button of my jean jacket with the other. As I stand there, I scan the first few rows of the audience and take a deep breath. And then, much to my horror, I realize that I have completely forgotten how my speech starts. So I stand there and try to remember it. Any of it. You know how sometimes a speaker comes out on stage and they just stand there for a few seconds and look at the audience, and you can feel the power of that pause, and you just know the speech is going to change your life before you've even heard one word of it? I was hoping that's what everyone thought was happening, that I was just pausing for a super powerful effect. But before that pause stretched too long and became awkward, and I'm not sure I started soon enough to avoid that, I made myself open my mouth and say something, anything. The words that came out were, "This has been the worst year of my life, and also the best." And it all started when I got fired in January. I then go on to give a version of my speech I never had before, and I watched as my words made people laugh and made some of them cry. And I realized that becoming a speaker was no longer just a dream, because there I was on that stage actually living it. And yes, a few points along the way felt like a nightmare. But sometimes going through a few nightmares is a price we are willing to pay to live our dreams. Okay, there you have it. That is my famous bathroom story. When I tell that story, I use all the best storytelling techniques. People feel like they were in that bathroom with me, and then they feel like they were standing on that stage with me. But do I connect the dots? Do I tell my audience what my stories mean for them? Do I tell them why I chose that particular story to share? I could definitely do a more thorough job of that, and I plan to from now on. When I tell my hiding in the bathroom story now, I could connect the dots if I were to follow it up with this. I told you that story because I know you have had the same kind of inner argument in your head. The one where your crazy, adventurous self is making your comfort-loving, things are fine the way they are self really angry and defensive and uncomfortable. In fact, you've probably had that kind of argument with yourself hundreds of times over the course of your life. And sadly, I know how often the crazy, adventurous side of you loses those arguments. And I also know that true progress and real fulfillment only comes when it's your comfort-loving self that loses those arguments. Ooh, can you feel how powerful that was to connect the dots for the audience? I am never going to tell that story again without connecting the dots like that at the end, because wow. In fact, I had to do about 4 takes because I kept crying every time I said it. I challenge you guys, and also myself, to go through your core stories that you use the most on stage and start finding ways to connect the dots for your audience. Your first step is to pick your favorite story that you tell the most often and write a connection statement for it. Why that story? Why tell it to those people? What's in it for them? Connect those dots and you will level up from a great speaker to a life-changing speaker. And isn't changing lives the reason why we all started speaking in the first place? You guys are awesome, and I appreciate you being part of my podcast family. If you love this podcast, please follow, like, subscribe, or whatever your app does. And please give a 5-star review if this show is helping you move closer to being that speaker everybody wants at their events. If you know someone that needs to hear this episode, please share it with them. Now, if you know you have a message to share, but you still haven't figured out what it is yet, let me help. Download my workbook, 10 Steps to Find the Message in Your Mess. It walks you through the process of finding the best stories from your life to create a powerful, transformational signature presentation so you can get out there and start changing lives from the stage. Find the link in the show notes or just type in www.kellykaywalker.com/workbook to download it for free. Let me spell you that because a lot of people have trouble with my middle name. It is KELLYKAYWALKER.com/workbook. This is Kelly Kaye Walker with another episode of Public Speaking Tips and Tales with Speaking Coach Kelly. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next one.